Good morning, and welcome back again to our study in spiritual living. This morning we're going to be looking at the second part of choosing wholeness as a lifestyle. Today we're going to be looking at being more involved with people. And again, for our members, you should have received an email with this handout for the week for you to work through on your own. We'll be covering some of the concepts in class today. And then if you didn't receive this, on our main web page, if you're watching us streaming there should be a link right above, and you should find the same handout there. So in order to start going forward with this lesson, I just want to back up just for a second. Last week we looked at this idea of anxiety moving into hope. And we defined anxiety as this overwhelming sense of lack of control. There's no point, there's no hope. We use the analogy of us swimming in a river and the current is really strong and we're trying to swim against it. And that we're feeling overwhelmed and we're very unstable in trying to maneuver throughout this. We correlated that with the last week of Jesus' life and how Satan was going after him in four different aspects in the idea of doubt, fear, loneliness, and guilt. And those are part of that anxiety. But then we looked at hope. And hope is this idea of continuation in whatever you're doing with a positive expectation at the end. So if you go back to this river, we're still swimming upstream, but hope helps us to have a different perspective of the situation, about looking at different avenues of maneuvering through this current. And we talked about how you can look off to the bank and you can start moving towards that direction. You might not reach where you want, maybe a little further downstream. But as we move into this, about being more involved with people, this coronavirus has turned us on our ear in just our normal day in and day out routine about what time we get up, about what time we go to work, what time we wake the kids up, and it's all out of sync now. But if you step back and look at it, when's the last time we saw families taking a walk together, playing in the front yard together, about not being pressed for time, but actually having time to be with your loved ones? We were talking, a few of us, about this, and it's this idea of going back to the 70s, the 80s, about how there was more time for our family. That's a positive aspect that we can look at such a horrible situation we're in. And again, it's about our perspective. So today, as we get into this, we're going to be looking at this idea of being involved with more people. Jesus, being involved with people, he set the example for us. And we talked about this over the last few lessons, about the idea how he would go out and he would meet people where they're at and fulfill their needs, their physical needs before the spiritual. And he would often travel, or people would travel to him where he would be at. And he never turned them away. He always would be meeting their needs and their concerns. He never turned them away. He never didn't have enough time. So this idea of Jesus, he was very single-minded in his purpose of being here. Now we have to keep in mind who Jesus is. He is the Christ, the Messiah. He is the Son of God. He is God in the flesh. But yet, what was his purpose? His purpose we can read in Luke chapter 19, verse 10. It was to seek and to save that which is lost. He came as a means of redemption for mankind. That's his whole purpose. Everything he did was to lead up to that. His death, burial, resurrection, and ascension back into heaven. If we look at Matthew chapter 9, this is an interesting look because the verse can be a little bit misleading, if you will. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 13, there's a lot going on in this passage. And when he gets down to verse 9, it talks about him calling Matthew. Verse 10, he's reclining at a table with Matthew and other tax collectors. And the spiritual leaders and the teachers of the time was criticizing him. In verse 13 it says, "But go and learn what this means. I desire compassion or mercy, and not sacrifice. For I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners." You see, in just making that small statement, if we look at it, this first part where he says, "Go and learn what this means," he has taken the role of a rabbi. Even back then, and even today in Jewish customs, a rabbi was the teacher. You came to him for learning. And when a rabbi would tell you, "Go and learn what this means," he's telling you to go and understand this. Not just knowledge, but life application. Figure out what this means to you. So Jesus has taken a dominant role in this understanding of teaching these Pharisees who just criticized him for eating with the tax collectors. But he says that he desires mercy and not sacrifice. This is repeated again in Matthew chapter 12, verse 7. But if we go back to the Old Testament in Hosea chapter 6, verse 6, it says, "For I delight," this is the Lord speaking, "for I delight in loyalty rather than sacrifice, and in the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings." And this terminology is used throughout all of the Bible in different settings and different times. But notice what he keeps saying is he doesn't desire the sacrifices per se. And I've said this before, it's about our mind, heart, and reason behind things. And the last passage we're going to look at concerning this is going to be Psalms 50. In Psalms 50, starting in verse 7, it says, "Hear, O my people, and I will speak. O Israel, I will testify against you. I am God, your God. I do not reprove you for your sacrifices, and your burnt offerings are continually before me. I shall take no young bull out of your house, nor male goat out of your fold. For every beast of the field is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know every bird of the mountain, and everything that moves in the field is mine. If I was hungry, I would not tell you, for the world is mine and all that it contains. Shall I eat the flesh of bulls, or drink the blood of male goats? Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving, and pay your vows to the Most High, and call upon me in the day of trouble, and I shall rescue you, and you will honor me." It is this idea that during this time, sacrificial system was still in place, and it was still a requirement. He's not saying to do away with it. But what he's saying is, where's your heart? Where's your thoughts? And where's your actions? Our relationship with God is more than just the external. And when he goes, if we go back to Matthew chapter 9, verse 13, and it says, "I desire mercy or compassion." What that's meaning is he wants us to have mercy towards people. Because in that context, he's talking about this idea of eating with tax collectors, the outcast, this traitor, this Jew who is a tax collector and becoming rich on taxing other Jews. He's a traitor, and Jesus is eating with him. But he turns around and he tells him that you need to show mercy, compassion. And that's where we're going to start, is this idea of mercy and compassion. See, he had compassion for the people. He always did. And we have looked at a lot of different places that talk about this. But we're going to be looking in Matthew chapter 14 about feeding of the 5,000. And see what's going on in 14 in the beginning part. We read about John the Baptizer being beheaded. This is the cousin of Jesus. And then in verse 13 it says, once Jesus heard of this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a lonely place by himself. He wanted to mourn his cousin. But the multitudes heard of this and followed him on foot. Verse 14. When Jesus went ashore, he saw the great multitude and felt compassion for them and healed their sick. Now verse 15. It says, and when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, the place is desolate, and the time is already past. So send out the multitude away, and they may go into the village and buy food for themselves. But Jesus said to them, they do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. And what they end up finding is 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus blessed it, it multiplied and fed everyone, and he was able to gather back quite a lot of food from feeding them. But notice that he had compassion on these people that came to him. And understand the circumstances. He went off to be alone to mourn. But he saw an opportunity and he felt compassion on them. And he took care of their physical needs and spiritual needs. The next one is in chapter 15, next one over. And what's going on here is in verse 21. And it says, and Jesus went away from there, withdrew into the district of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman came out from the region and began to cry out, have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is cruelly demon-possessed. But he did not answer her a word. And the disciples came to him and kept asking him, send her away, for she is shouting out after us. And he answered and said, I was sent only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and began to bow down before him, saying, Lord, help me. And he answered and said, it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. And he said, Lord, but even the dogs feed from the crumbs which fall from the master's table. And Jesus answered and said to her, O woman, your faith is great. Be done as you wish. And her daughter was healed at once. Now we need to understand this situation. There's a lot going on. Jesus says he came for the Jews only and first. And that this Canaanite woman was not part of the royal priesthood or the chosen people of Israel. And he was explaining to him that I'm not here for you. But she turned around and began to humble herself before her and continued to plead and explain, I'm not looking for the full portion. What I'm looking for is just the smallest part. And Jesus answered the request. But understand something. She did not go to him demanding. She didn't go to him with this expectation of you owe me. She did not understand any of that. In this idea of who he was, she had an understanding and what he came to do, like we talked about in Luke 19:10. And at this time, the gospel was meant for Israel. It was afterwards, after the death, burial, resurrection of Christ, that it was made available to even her and us today. You see, in 1 Timothy, it talks about this very concept of a household. It's not berating the woman for her place in society. It's not looking down upon her. It was just the standard of living. And this idea of in 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8, it talks about this concept. If anyone does not provide for his own, and especially those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. It was this idea that Christ came for a purpose for Israel. This woman who wasn't of that belief and was not part of Israel wanted help. But because of how she asked and what she asked, Jesus provided for her. And we talked about this before. The leper in Matthew chapter 8, 1 through 3. The leper comes to him and he touches him first, then healed her. He filled the physical need of that person. and then healed him, spiritually. You see, during this time that we're locked down, if you will, we're not working as much. We're not traveling out. And, this lesson is talking about being more involved with people. And I know it sounds a little bit odd because of the social distance that we need to keep, and we're not to meet more than 10 people in a gathering, and there's a lot of requirements that are placed upon us. But what I want you to understand is a few things from this lesson. How hard is it to write a card? How hard is it to pick up the phone and ask, how are you doing? Now, in most people, they'll always say, I'm okay. We put on this facade of this idea that everything is all right. We don't need help. We don't need anything, because the world has put this expectation of it's wrong to be in need. It shows weakness. It shows that you can't care for yourself. It shows all negative. But as Christians, that's not what it means. It's a twofold blessing, if you will. If I'm in need and I let someone know, it is a blessing to them to be able to help me. But it's also a blessing to me to receive it, because it helps me to remain where I need to be as a Christian. We're not talking of the world. We're talking Christians, because we're to be humble. We're to be this mentality of others being more important. And we kept talking about this over the last few lessons. And at the end of the lesson, we look at this scale and how others need to have more importance in order to have the right relationship with God, with Christ. Because Christ is the one who is our example, who is our standard. You see, we should be reaching out to others. We all know people who are sick. Maybe not because of the coronavirus, but they are struggling with ailments. Maybe they're not able to see that many people. Maybe they don't have any family. How important would that card be? Or that phone call? Or just simply picking up some groceries for them. Taking it to their house, now leaving it at their doorstep and backing away. Don't have contact with them. But still, these gestures of meeting people where they're at, becoming more involved, this is the prime opportunity for us. In the middle of this chaos that's going on with the coronavirus, we can take a different perspective and see it as an opportunity to become more involved with people, not just our home life, not just our loved ones, but people that we know. It's crucial. It is vital to our relationship with God and to one another. You see, Jesus knew the longing of God. In Galatians chapter 6, it talks about this very idea. This is Paul talking. And it says, "So then, while you have opportunity, let's do good to all men, and especially to those of the household of faith." You see, we have opportunity right now. We have the means to help. Now, I know and I understand that we're not doing financially as well as we were in the past. But sometimes being financially set and financially well off sometimes takes away from our time with people, with our loved ones, with our family, with our friends. So we can see a balance in this idea of we can start resetting our priorities. We can refocus ourselves on Christ, because we must take these opportunities. We must make the most of them to all people, as Paul says, but especially to the household of faith. We can read in Philippians chapter 2 about this idea of the encouragement of Christ. In Philippians chapter 2, starting in verse 1, "If therefore there is any encouragement in Christ, if there is any love, if there is any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affliction, affection and compassion. Make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intended on one purpose. Do nothing from selfish or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, let each of you regard the other as more important than himself. And do not merely look out for your own personal interest, but also the interest of others. You see, it talks a lot about this idea of what it means to take the most of the opportunity. It's about taking and making the most of it all and keeping in focus as a Christian why we are here. Because Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God, God in the flesh, came to serve and not be served in return. He used this avenue of people coming to him to set up examples for us today. The one that always comes to my mind is Jesus entering into the household with his disciples. And it was the custom that they would, the lowest servant would wash the feet of those that enter. No one did. So Jesus himself washes the feet of the disciples, and even Judas, the one he knew would betray him. That is a true act of service and making the most of the opportunity and not thinking just merely of yourself, but of others. You see, the one thing that can stop us and hinder us from actually pursuing this concept of being more involved with other people is fear. You remember, fear was something we talked about last lesson, and I briefly referred to it in this idea of the starting of this lesson, that there was 4 things that Satan threw at him in his last week on this earth. It was doubt, it was fear, it was loneliness, and it was guilt. That idea of fear. We sometimes won't reach out to others because of the fear of rejection. Well, yeah, you might be rejected. But if you really are honest with yourself, we have rejected others trying to help us too. And we forget that part though. But you see, we are called to be servants. We are called to love others. We are called to make the most of the opportunities set before us. You see in 1 John chapter 4, verse 18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves punishment, and the one who fears is not perfected in love. And what's going on is this idea of balancing out. We have love, we have fear, and we allow fear to dominate us. We don't have an understanding of what love is when we allow that to happen. So sometimes that is the reason that we don't show compassion. On Thursday night, we're going through a study in Ephesians, and we're just finished up chapter 5. But there was an interesting thing that I want to bring up when it comes to trying to find more opportunity in helping those that are around us. It's in chapter 5. And chapter 5 deals with a lot of day in, day out relationships with one another and how it should be and what are the priorities, who's more important, and it keeps going. But then it gets down to verse 21. It says, be subject to one another in the fear of the Lord. We struggle with this idea of submission, being in subjection, submit, being subject to one another. Because we think it's an idea of showing weakness. Now, I want to remind you again that Christ is our example. He would submit to different things. Like the example I talked about in the idea of washing the disciples' feet. And even Judas, the betrayer, that he knew he would betray him, he still washed his feet. And this idea of being in subjection to one another. We talked about this on Thursday night, and this idea of why is this so important? That if I'm in subjection to you, and you're in subjection to me, and then Bob over here, we're in subjection to him, why is that so important? Because who does that leave to be in control? That's God. It's Christ. If we take a step back and regain our proper place about caring for one another, about being there for one another, we get this understanding that it is God, for the Christians, who is in control. But if we try to take a dominant lead and we start trying to be the head servant, if you will, I'm a servant, but I'm going to tell these other servants how to be a servant. Well, there's a right way and wrong way to do that. But if I come off as arrogant, as holier than thou, if you will, I'm missing the mark on that. Because I am to be a servant. I need to allow God to rule in my heart. But I can't do that if I'm not in subjection. And this idea of being in subjection to one another, the world has a very negative view about this idea of being in submission. In the Greek, I'm not going into the Greek that much. I just want to point out one thing. This word right here, and then when it starts leading into the next section of chapter 5, it starts dealing with the household relationship, the husband, the wife, the children, and on it goes. But he starts off with this idea, first off, you need to be submissive to one another. But in the Greek, what it is a present passive participle. And what that means is the idea it has continuous action, but it's not what you think. We normally think in a negative sense. That I give up all will, I have no purpose, I have no desires anymore, if you will. But in the Greek, this will actually carry the sense of this. It's actually a military term. And in the military, what will happen sometimes as you move as a team, you will line up as you move. Or if you enter into a room, the last person is least important than the first person. You're all vital to one another. You support one another. But a better analogy of this is, it carries the idea of a bridge. The bridge is what allows things to move back and forth, the cars, the people, whatever it is. But that bridge is useless unless it has the support underneath, the pillars, the structure that holds that bridge up. That's the terminology that you can get from this word, to submit to one another. You are in a supportive role. You are there for the other, not to lay down and allow someone else to walk over you, but in the idea of that you have strength, you have purpose, you have direction, you have an understanding of your role and your purpose in this relationship. You see, it keeps going and it talks about this idea of the importance of your role in being submissive. You know, we looked at this idea in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and Paul's talking here about the importance of what the body is and how there's many different parts of the body, and that one part is not more important than the other. In chapter 12 of 1 Corinthians, let's start off in verse 18. But now God has placed the members, each one of them, in the body just as he desires. And if they were all one member, where would the body be? But now there are many members, but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, or again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, it is much truer that the member of the body which seems to be weaker are necessary. And those members of the body which we deem less honorable, on those we bestow more abundant honor. And our unseemly members come to have more abundant. It's this idea that in the world we can view a person in need as less important. They don't really fit in. We can even get into this mindset in this concept of this. Well, I've struggled and I got through on my own merits. I'm able to get through it. They need to struggle and they need to get over it themselves. That might be true that you have been able to overcome obstacles placed in your life on your own. But that doesn't mean everybody can. Just as Paul talked about, in the body there are weaker members. Not less important, but weaker. Because we're all at different spiritual levels within the body of Christ. I might be lesser, if you will, than some of my instructors at Sunset. Some of my elders here have a more deeper understanding and wisdom than I do. Does that mean I'm less important? No, I just am not where they're at. And at times I need help. At times I need advice. At times I need a tap on the back of the head to bring me back around. But it doesn't mean that I'm less or I have no purpose. And see, we need to understand that as we're striving towards this understanding of reaching out and being more involved with people. Do not look down upon people is what I want you to take away from this. Remember where you have come from, because we have all done dumb things. Sometimes we continue to do these ignorant things. Sometimes we need help from others to get ourselves out of that vicious cycle that seems like we have no hope. Remember, that's our purpose here today. Again, we're back to our little picture, our little scales. And I know you already know it's going to be Christ on top, because that's what we're trying to figure out. And again, it's me, I'm a little bit less important. And then others is who has more importance than me. It's about the idea about being in subjection to everyone around me. Not in this idea of rolling over and exposing my belly, if you will. Not the idea of being walked over, but this idea of becoming a supportive role in someone else's life. Because I guarantee you right now, you know people that aren't willing to say they need help because they're afraid. There's that lack of understanding that it's okay to be in need. But it's also how people reach out to them, which is vital. If we make light of it, if we make jokes of it, well, you're doing it again. Weren't you struggling with this the other day? And you're still... We need to go to them with the compassion of Christ, with the wisdom of the Holy Spirit, and the knowledge of God. We need to remember who we are. We need to remember that there's multiple perspectives of every situation. And it is our job as Christians to take hold of these and to make the most of them, because the days are short. Our life is just like a vapor. We need to make the most of all of these opportunities. So this is the lesson today. I want you to think about this a little bit. We have the time today. And over the next week, most likely, and it might be even a little farther beyond that, step back and just notice things around you. Notice that family down the street taking that walk. Notice how the kids are playing once again outside. Notice how there is some positive in the middle of this chaos. But then take a hold of it. See how you can help someone. It might be physically, it might be just an ear. But it's all important. The lesson's yours. Thank you so much.
Let us rise up and build in the name of the Lord, joining hands and hearts as one. As we serve Him each day, as we walk in His way, praise our Father and His Son. There are lost souls today, let us show them the way, till our time on earth is done. Let us rise up and build in the name of the Lord, joining hands and
About. It's about following Him, choosing to follow Him at any cost, at all cost, to serve Him and follow Him into the presence of God. So what? So what is always a question I like asking after a lesson, after I teach, after I read something. I ask myself, so what? If there is no application, it was a good talk and nothing more. So let's see if we can make some application here. We are in a time of unrest. The coronavirus, it can be scary. The unknowns, the uncertainties. But the problem is this. Because we are sheltered in place here in Smith County, because of the stay-at-home orders, people are only thinking of themselves. The government tells us to store up 2 weeks' worth to make sure we have enough for our household. They're not saying to starve. They're not saying to go without. But you've all seen it. These people that are buying like 20 cases of toilet paper, I still don't understand that, but they're doing it. They're taking more than they need. And see, that's the problem during this time of unrest, this uncertainty of what's going on, as we're trying to find ways to overcome this and combat this. We can turn inward. Self-centeredness. And that's the complete opposite of Christianity. Christianity is not about self-centeredness. It is about being God-centered, Christ-centered. It's about placing others before us. Remember, we are the light to the world. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify God who is in heaven. Matthew 5:16. That's who we are. So at the bottom of your page, you'll see this little guy standing on the scales. So on this top line, that center point where we try to keep balance, go ahead and write in Christ. That's where Christ goes. Because we try to find balance within Christ. And as we're talking about being a servant, we have to have ourselves in there. We have to have me, you, on the scale. If you notice, it's a little off-centered, at least on my screen. Others need to have more weight than we do. They have to have more importance than we do. They have to have priority. That's what it means to be a servant. If we want to excel as a servant, we have to continually push ourselves. And this is one way that we can, is by looking at the life of Christ, because that's what he calls us to. Those of us that are Christians, when we took on Christ in baptism, it was a point in our life that we understood it was not about me. It was about Christ. It was about, like in Luke chapter 9, it's about denying yourself, picking up your cross daily and following after him. That's what we're called to do. Even in a time of unrest, uncertainty, we're not sure what's going on around us with this virus. But it doesn't give us reason or cause to forget who we are and who we are to become like. So that's our lesson today. It's yours. You can choose to do with it in whatever way you choose. But I encourage you with this time that we have, when we are limited on leaving the house. Many of us aren't working. There's some that's working at our homes. Take this time, this free time, as an opportunity to grow closer to God, to Christ, and understand what it means to have a spiritual life. This is the prime opportunity for us. We don't have as many distractions. We don't have as many things to get in our way to cause us to fall short. The lesson's yours. Thank you very much.